Look, I'm just going to say it. Stop arguing. Let's just be brutally honest here. Most of us don't argue because we want clarity. We argue because we want to win. We want to be right. We want to be right. We want to hear the other person say, okay, you're right. I was wrong. That moment rarely comes. And even if it does, it doesn't feel like a victory because what we were really chasing wasn't connection. It was control. When your mind is locked on being right, your ears shut down. You're not listening to understand. You're listening to respond, to defend, to outsmart. You might even start mentally rehearsing your next point while they're still talking. Sound familiar? That's not communication. That's combat. It's not a conversation. It's a competition. And guess what? Nobody wins a war where both people feel like the enemy. Think about this. If your goal is to win the argument, then you've already lost the relationship in that moment. Because instead of trying to meet in the middle, you're trying to climb on top. Instead of asking yourself, what's really going on with them? You're thinking, how can I prove them wrong? And if that's where your head is, you've already abandoned empathy, curiosity, and respect, three things every real connection needs to survive. Let me be clear. This doesn't mean you roll over and let people treat you like a doormat. It doesn't mean you agree with things you don't believe in. But it does mean you stop turning every disagreement into a battlefield. When your pride becomes more important than the person in front of you, you've already crossed the line from being assertive to being aggressive. And deep down, you know it. Here's what's wild. A lot of people think that winning an argument makes them strong. But real strength, that's staying calm when someone's poking your buttons. It's pausing long enough to ask, why does this even matter to me so much? So much. It's choosing to understand before you try to be understood. That takes way more guts than yelling louder or tossing out a clever insult ever will. Most of the time, the person you're arguing with doesn't feel heard. And let's be real, you probably don't either. You're both fighting so hard to be seen that neither of you actually are. So what happens? You talk in circles. You dig in your heels. You say things you don't mean. And by the end of it, you're both just exhausted, wondering how things got so messy over something that started off small. Here's a radical idea. What if your next disagreement wasn't about who's right? What if your mission was to get curious instead of defensive? What if you paused, breathed, and said, help me understand where you're coming from? That one sentence can change the entire dynamic. Because the truth is, people don't open up when they feel attacked. They open up when they feel safe. And understanding creates safety. Winning does not. So the next time you feel yourself gearing up to argue, ask yourself this. Am I trying to connect or am I trying to conquer? Conquer. Because those two paths lead to very different places. One builds bridges, the other burns them, and you always have the power to choose which one you walk across. You ever try to talk to someone in the middle of a full-blown meltdown? Doesn't work. Does it? Work? Does it? Their voice gets louder, their face is tense, and no matter what you say, it just bounces off them like you're talking to a brick wall. That's not a coincidence. That's what happens when someone is emotionally flooded. Their brain is literally hijacked by emotion, and nothing rational is getting through. Emotional flooding is a real physiological response. When someone feels attacked, unsafe, or overwhelmed, boom, fight or flight kicks in. Their heart rate spikes. Their body floods with stress hormones. Their ability to think clearly, to reason, to listen, it all shuts down. They're not ignoring you because they're stubborn, they're in survival mode, and if you're still trying to argue with them in that state, you're not solving the problem. You're pouring gasoline on it. Now here's the trap. Most of us respond to emotional flooding by matching it. They raise their voice, you raise yours. They get defensive, you double down. And before you know it, you're both flooded. Two people, zero logic, just raw emotion crashing back and forth like a storm. Nobody's hearing anything. Nobody's calming down. You're just stuck in a loop of reactivity, and it goes nowhere fast. And let's be real, it's not just them who get emotionally flooded. You do too. We all do. Think about the last time you said something you regretted in a heated moment. Odds are you were overwhelmed, hijacked, and reacting on instinct. That's what emotional flooding does. It turns grown, intelligent adults into defensive, panicked versions of themselves, not because they're bad people, but because their nervous system is screaming, I'm not safe right now. When you see someone emotionally flooded, your job is not to push harder. It's not to approve your point or make them understand. Your job is to pause, to recognize that no progress will happen until safety is restored. This isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It takes strength to step back instead of stepping in. It takes emotional maturity to say, you know what? Let's take a break. We'll talk when we're both in a better place. Duh. One of the biggest mistakes we make is thinking that logic works in the middle of an emotional storm. It doesn't. You can be making the most brilliant point in the world, but if the other person is flooded, they literally can't hear you. It's like trying to teach someone how to swim while they're drowning. They don't need your argument. They need air. This is where self-awareness becomes your superpower. You have to recognize the signs. Look for tension in their body. Watch for short, rapid breathing. Notice the tone of their voice, the defensiveness in their words. When those signs show up, that's not the moment to press harder. That's the moment to create space, silence, safety. Because nothing productive happens until the nervous system resets. So the next time you're in a conflict and the other person is emotionally flooded, remember this. It's not the time to fix the issue. It's the time to fix the energy. Get calm. Stay grounded. Don't take the bait. Create the conditions for connection, not escalation. Because until that flood recedes, no real conversation can begin. And your power lies in knowing that and choosing to lead with calm instead of chaos. Let's be honest. You know when you're stuck in a loop. You say the same thing 3, 4, 5 times, hoping this time it'll land. You change the tone, you rephrase it, you slow it down, still nothing. And now, you're not even communicating anymore. You're just repeating. And that's your first red flag that this conversation isn't moving forward. It's stuck. Repetition and conflict is a symptom. It's your brain's way of signaling, I'm not being heard. But here's the tough truth. If you have to say it more than once, you're not in a conversation. You're in a power struggle. The more you repeat yourself, the more you're trying to force understanding instead of creating it. And the harder you push, the more the other person resists. Why? Because repetition can feel like pressure. It can sound like control. And nobody responds well to that. We all think that repeating ourselves will somehow break through. It won't. Repeating yourself doesn't make your point clearer. It makes your energy louder. And when someone feels overwhelmed or pressured, their walls go up. The words may be the same, but the tone changes. What starts off as explanation quickly turns into frustration. And once frustration enters the room, empathy usually leaves. When you're stuck in a loop, it's because you're trying to get clarity from the wrong level of conversation. You're focused on what's being said on the surface, the facts, the details, the behavior, but often the real problem is buried underneath. The issue isn't always that they didn't understand your words. The issue is that there's an emotional block in the way. Hurt, shame, fear, pride. And no amount of repeating will move that. Only connection can. Repetition often reveals a deeper need. The need to feel seen, validated, and understood. But instead of saying, I don't feel like you're hearing me, just keep restating the same thing. Louder, slower, sharper. But saying it again won't make them hear you. What makes someone hear you is when they feel safe enough to listen. Repetition doesn't create safety. Patience does. Curiosity does. Self-control does. There's also a good chance that while you're repeating yourself, they're doing the same. Now you've got 2 people saying the same things on repeat, just in different words. That's not a discussion. That's a tug of war with no rope left to pull. It's emotionally draining and completely unproductive. And unless someone chooses to shift the energy, it never ends well. The most powerful move you can make in that moment is to pause. Not to win, not to prove, just to disrupt the pattern. Try something different. Ask a question. Reflect instead of react. Or just stop talking for a moment and say, though I feel like we're going in circles, can we take a breather? That one pause can create space. And space is what lets clarity come through. So if you catch yourself saying the same thing again, don't get louder, get smarter. Don't keep pushing, start listening, not just to them, but to you. What are you really trying to say? What's the deeper need behind the repetition? What are you asking for underneath the words? Because when you stop repeating and start reflecting, the conversation shifts, and that's when real connection can finally begin. You ever catch yourself saying something mid-argument and think, where the hell did that come from? That's what happens when you're triggered. 1 second you're calm, the next you're snapping, defending, blaming, or shutting down completely. You're not responding to the situation in front of you. You're reacting from something buried way behind you. That's what being triggered does. It hijacks your logic and puts your pain in the driver's seat. When you're triggered, it's not just about what's happening right now. It's about everything that moment reminds you of. It could be a tone of voice, a look, a word that hits just a little too hard. And suddenly, you're not arguing with your partner or your coworker. You're arguing with your past. You're fighting old wounds, unresolved stuff, unmet needs, and that's why your reaction feels so intense. It's bigger than the moment. It's historical. The tricky part is when you're reactive, your brain convinces you that what you're feeling is truth, that your perspective is 100% correct, that you have to defend yourself, that you need to clap back. But the truth is, you're not in control when you're reactive. Your nervous system is. And when your nervous system is running the show, your ability to think clearly, to listen deeply, or to communicate respectfully is practically gone. And here's what we don't like to admit. Being reactive makes things worse. Every time you say something sharp and they get defensive, you raise your voice and they shut down. You accuse and they stop trusting you. And even if you will win that moment, you lose something far more valuable: safety, trust, and connection. You might feel powerful in the heat of it, but when it cools off, that's when the regret shows up. It's also worth saying that reactivity isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like stonewalling. Eye-rolling, walking away in silence, passive-aggressive comments. That's reactivity too. It's just a quieter version. But the outcome is the same: disconnection. Because whether you explode or shut down, the message you send is, I'm not here to understand, I'm here to protect myself. And the minute protection takes priority, the relationship takes a hit. The most powerful people in conflict are the ones who know they're triggered and don't act on it. They pause, they breathe, they create space between the emotion and the reaction. That space is everything. That's where self-control lives. That's where growth happens. That's where you get to choose your response instead of being dragged around by your emotions. If you want to stop being reactive, you have to build emotional awareness. You have to recognize the signs. The heat rising in your chest, the tension in your jaw, the rush of energy in your limbs. That's your cue. That's your body saying, we're about to go off the rails. And when you catch it, don't talk, don't type, don't text. Pause, breathe, cool off. Your future self will thank you. Your relationships will thank you. Your relationships will thank you, because here's the truth. Being triggered is human. We all have emotional landmines, but being reactive, that's optional. That's a habit. And habits can change. So if you want better arguments, deeper connections, more peace in your life, you've got to stop letting your triggers run the show. Your emotions are valid, but your reactions, those are your responsibility. Let's get brutally honest. You're not arguing because you're looking for a solution. You're arguing because you want to prove you're right. That's the real driver. And if you're being real with yourself, you know it. You're not listening to understand. You're not curious about the other side. The other side? You're in performance mode, constructing your case like a lawyer. You want the verdict to come down in your favor. You see? I told you so. But here's the hard truth. What we don't realize is that proving you're right often comes from insecurity. It's about needing control. It's about protecting your ego. You want to win because you need to feel certain. You need to feel certain. You need to feel powerful. You need to feel like you're not the one to blame. But when you're stuck in that mindset, it's not about truth. It's about dominance. And once the conversation shifts to power, it's no longer safe for the other person to be open. They'll either retreat, attack, or shut down. Think about it. How many arguments have spiraled out of control because neither of you could back down? You weren't even fighting about the original issue anymore. You were fighting about who would admit they were wrong first. It's a trap. And the longer you stay in it, the worse it gets. Because now you're not trying to fix anything. You're trying to win. And winning comes with a cost. Your pride gets satisfied, but your relationship suffers. Here's the irony. When you argue to prove you're right, the other person almost never says, all right. Even if they know you're right, they'll resist. Why? Because nobody likes to be backed into a corner. Nobody likes to be made to feel small, stupid, or wrong, even if they are. So instead of admitting it, they push back harder. They get defensive. They make it about something else. And suddenly the argument multiplies instead of resolves. So the question becomes, what do you value more, being right or being connected? Do you want to build trust or just win battles? Do you want short-term ego gratification or long-term peace and clarity? Because you can't have both. If every disagreement becomes a courtroom where you're the prosecutor, don't be surprised when people stop talking to you altogether. Nobody wants to be on trial in their own relationship. The real strength is not in proving your point. It's in dropping the need to prove anything at all. It's in being the one who says, let's slow down. I'm not here to win. I'm here to understand. Shift changes everything. Suddenly, the argument loses its heat. The tension breaks. You move from confrontation to conversation, and that's where growth lives. Not in being right, but in being real enough to let go of the fight